Hello and welcome to the Improviding Life podcast. This is Lori Love, your host, and we are going to explore how life can be more livable with a very special guest. Today we have Isabel, who is a very intuitive, nougaty, like layered, really dynamic, creative wellness guide. And I'm so honored to have you here and would love for you to go ahead and introduce yourself however you would like.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat. And hello, everyone who's listening. I'm Isabel Bagsik. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a creativity wellness guide and art director, space holder, and just very excited to support creatives and visionaries and leaders to really hone in on their creative medicine, whatever that looks like, and launch that out into the world and get recognized and get compensated. So that is what I'm excited by and lit up by, and what I'm here to do lately.
That just felt like the actual idea of an elevator pitch mixed with a really great hug from someone that you've been like wanting to see for a long time. It
Mm,
was like enveloping. So thank you for sharing
I love that.
exactly as you did. So, for those of you who have listened to other guest episodes, I like to start with a random word that's generated online. And I'm going to go ahead and share that, and then we will just like riff. And I'll first ask you what's the first thing that comes up. And I want to preface this when I first saw this word, I was like, oh, but it also felt like allowing it and seeing what happens. So I just want to set the context that the word that generated was offender.
Oh,
So, what is your
interesting.
first thoughts that are coming up with the word offender?
Yeah, I can see how that might have brought up some ooh feelings. But what is coming up to mind now after, like having that hit my brain, is thinking about, what are the moments that kind of trigger you, or is it like, and not like trauma, like the big T trauma, but are there people or are there things that, create the sense of like offending within you? And is it like what's coming to mind is, at least for me, is it truly offensive, or is it like a projection I have that I still need to heal or work through or talk through? And so that's really interesting to hear that word and move past, in a meta way, like I had to move past like what I thought offender means and the first ideas of what we think offenders are in our minds. Maybe it's a certain kind of person. Um, and other thoughts of like, okay, then what is another layer deeper of what offender could possibly mean to me right now? And that's what came up.
Yeah, I appreciate you feeling the recoil and navigating that and hearing you share out and knowing a bit about your work and the way that, inner child play is welcomed and having conversations about systemic equality and really the intersectionality of experiencing life are coming up. And I just can't help but want to focus in on the idea of being a child and that inner child relationship. And it's almost like, at least in my experience, a lot of what offended me as a child and what feels like is offensive to my inner child are the ways that, like, if I would share what was my lived experience or something that was valid to me, it was so easily dismissed. And so I'm curious on if you have any thoughts or practices or experiences with navigating something that you know is true and valid and meaningful for you. Perhaps it hasn't been met that way externally. And what is sort of the ISPO way to navigate those moments as they're happening?
What a lovely question. Thank you. I think for me, regarding navigating all of that, especially with inner child work, is thinking about how, if I were to give a specific example, creativity and pursuing that was not encouraged in my childhood. But fortunately, it wasn't discouraged either. Um, and so that was an experience that really affected how I viewed the value of this as a career. And growing up, creativity and expressing myself through arts and crafts, through experimenting with fashion and style, and as I got older with makeup and different hairstyles, that was something that even my family couldn't really relate to or understand how it really was my life essence, that it is important and is a part of me. And I didn't realize how big of a part that was to my whole self until I got older and until I went through really big life moments. And so navigating that and affirming myself was finding other folks in similar roles or who I looked up to affirm these experiences and these desires and dreams that I had regarding creative careers and what is even viable or feasible, especially as a woman of color, not really seeing that encouraged because in the culture in the Philippines, you stereotypically hear them become nurses or doctors or engineers, artists or creatives. Like that's not even a concept because with immigrant parents, as myself, survival was at the top of their mind. And so, really understanding these both ands, holding these dualities of not truly feeling understood or encouraged with my creative desires, but also knowing that my immigrant parents didn't even have that as a concept that they could relate to because they were so focused on something so heavy, which is also truly valid. And so holding all of that together continues to drive me into caring for my inner child and having the gratitude and the forgiveness and the patience with my personal experience.
Thank you for sharing. And I was just having a thought right as you came to it at the end, which felt so lovely to like feel you going there about how as children, we have our own valid experience, and then our caregivers are having their own valid experience. And I just have this curiosity of how life is more livable over time as there's more intergenerational tool sharing and a greater capacity happens. And like I find now, especially as a parent, that I can see the humanity of my parents much more, and I can see how the ways that I was taught to have really harsh judgments and criticisms of self from like how my parents internalize their feelings towards self. And so I just appreciate you in sharing that dynamic of each of those experiences is valid. And also, as you shared, I was reminded of my friend and former grad school roommate, Patty Umali, who actually created a video game called The Girl Who Sees that's all about Filipino indigenous practices and culture and how being able to see when we were living together is when she was first starting the storyboarding out and learning how to create video games and seeing not only the ability to creatively express, but also feeling the healing that was happening there too, of being able to actually ask self, which facets of this story are most meaningful to me? How do I want to portray those? Does this character have certain attributes of mine or not? And really being able to see that world building. And so while that thought was happening, I was also then thinking of Halloween. But the question that came up was, let's imagine a world where on Halloween day, one day a year is the day where you have to be who people like want you to be, right? So you're only masking on one day of the year. So all the rest of the years, you get to actually be yourself. And so I just wanted to ask, like, what are some of the perhaps characters or elements of personality traits that you feel like would be how you would be able to fully express and be the most like nourished, sustained version of yourself if 364 days out of the year, um, there were no fucks to give about anything and no external pressures. Like, what would that feel like to dream in that space?
I love that question. That's such a fun thought experiment to play with. And for me, I feel like as I've gotten older, I've gotten to feel more comfortable to live in that space, especially at the beginning of the pandemic where I shaved off all my hair, shaved off all my hair. and despite my parents' discomfort with that. But I just, had the urge and impulse to do it. And I think with that question that you shared, I'm thinking about my younger self when I was, in a way, uh, trying to form myself and shape shift and mold myself into these boxes that are created by society. There's no real rule or guideline that we truly have to fit into performing or looking one way or the other. Getting critical now as I'm older about who is creating those systems, who's creating these ideas of beauty or success or whatever those metrics are that you're uh, measuring yourself to. So if I were to really talk to my younger self, again, talking about the inner child, about releasing from those narratives, it's thinking about and dreaming about what truly feels so exciting to do, to experience, to be. Who does that look like? How do they dress? What activities do they do? Even how does their hair look? What activities and types of people that they engage and interact with? Are they out in the sun in nature? And really dreaming about who this person is that really feels so free in their bodies. And again, thinking about my immigrant parents and my ancestors, dreaming so big that in a way it is honoring their sacrifices and their survival and their hard work. How can I dream up a reality where I can actually live it and embody it from a foundation of joy and pleasure and rest that was truly only could have been a dream for them. So that that is what's coming up for me.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really want to like chew on the last part of what you said because it's giving vibes of like reframing a daydream, right? So often in capitalistic society, it's like, oh, you're a daydreamer, snap out of it. Go put your head down and get to work. But essentially what you were just speaking to is the sort of bounty that's possible when your days, like your day-to-day life, looks like the wildest dreams your ancestors wouldn't have had the capacity to even be able to imagine. And even with your parents navigating all of the complexities of being immigrants as well. Like you said, when you're in that survival mode, there isn't that room to dream, right? And even when you're physically asleep and dreaming, I imagine the layers of stress, myself included, like your dreams then even get tainted a certain way, right? Because you're still trying to navigate and process the waking world. So I just feel, yeah, I just want to like play um with that idea of like reframing daydreams like that too, where it's like how can they actually be maybe these micro moments in our life where we're just really luxuriating in that of like, oh shit, I'm stuck at a red light. Wow, I have 10 seconds to like really daydream and imagine, like what's the time when who else has been in this very spot waiting for something, right? And just like sort of going off on that for the sheer sort of joy of perhaps not ever actually getting the answers, but being open to the visceral feelings or things that could be coming up.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's part of what I invite my clients to think about is what are the accessible ways that you can incorporate gratitude into your creative practice, into your day-to-day life? Because oftentimes not many people have like a week-long break in their days to just travel and go on an international retreat. Sometimes it really is just how can they find that peace in that sense of gratitude and awe of life in the 5 minutes in between their Zoom calls or in between errands of, going to the grocery store and picking up their kids and all of these real life activities and tasks and responsibilities. How can we incorporate these really important and vital yet accessible techniques and practices into our lives so that that could nurture our creative spirit and really shift how we navigate the world, navigate our relationships, navigate ideas and our dreams because I definitely was a daydreamer, still am, and just such a fun space to be in and think up new new worlds, really.
Yeah, and hearing you share that, I'm reminded of two things. So one just happened like an hour ago. My toddler is she's gonna be 2.5 next week, and now she has this internal clock of just knowing when dad should be home from work. And so it was at that, it was a little about half an hour after she'd been home, and I could feel her getting antsy, right? And so she asked to come outside, so we were outside playing, and about 30 minutes later, we're still outside playing, and she's just so cute, like a little. I call her one of her nicknames is Meerkat because Mare is a short version of her name. But she has like prairie dog moments where she's looking for
Oh,
something, and so she's looking around looking for my husband's Jeep. And one of the times when she was running back up the driveway because it's kind of at incline, I realized that her heels had worn through her socks while we were playing, and my big toe had also poked through my socks. I just had this moment of laughing where I'm like, that feels so successful today because that means we played so like
mm,
fervently. We were just so into play that we're busting through our socks. And then I also had this moment of like hearing the what I've been taught to think of, oh no, it's like a wasted item, or how dare us not take care of it, and like holding space for that because that is also valid in a reality, right? Also allowing in possibilities like, oh, maybe it's a fun sewing project, or maybe they become puppets, or maybe it's okay to understand that things have expiration dates and, they either have another use or it becomes, something where we practice being okay with the idea of waste. And yeah, allowing that like moment that could have very easily either been unnoticed or something really like sort of pathologized of how dare I let us go outside without shoes, like all those things could have happened, and relishing in the fact that those weren't the loudest voices. Um, and then the second thing that I would nope, that was just such a fun thing. I don't know if I remember the second thing. It's just fine too.
I love
Yeah.
that. I think that's like what a beautiful like reflection during that moment with your child and how deep you went with your thoughts and how easily those thoughts came to you not being connected to tech. You were outside, you were in joy, you were playing. Like that's so beautiful. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you for prompting because there's like I felt all of that in that moment. And my favorite thing about being a mental projector is that it's not until I start talking do I actually feel the impact of things. So even in that, I'm like, having like a secondary savoring moment too, because I I may not have been able to marinate in all of those feelings and layers had this conversation not happened, right? And I think that also, thinking about ancestors and sort of the layers of or ways that dysfunction exists in my family of origin, and what I'm navigating with that now is how like the presence of dysfunction generation ends up having the effect of the family members who will at least like acknowledge or feel that it's there, then leaving, right? Understandably so, of getting away from family, but that also then leads to a lot of isolation and living far away from people, not feeling a sense of community or connection. So I'm realizing more and more now that, like a central value of mine is to have trying to have the most capacity available for a connection to be possible, and navigating the ways that COVID and the ongoing layers then of pandemic life happening, and, living, I myself then carrying out those cycles of leaving from family, right after college when as soon as I could get out, right, and now being 5 hours away, but then also at the same time being like, it would actually be nice to be closer, but like, what is capitalism and how do I just uproot everything and,
Mhm.
like navigating all of that. And just seeing how can, yeah, the moments that make me feel alive throughout the day be this signpost and reminder that, again, that daydream element, like it's happening, because I know for a fact from, ancestral work and energy work, that it was too dangerous to be aware and put words to family dynamics. It was uh, essentially a one-way ticket to being harmed or excommunicated and or both. And so even the ability and willingness to, yeah, play outside, notice, um, have conversations feels very radical. Um, yeah, I feel like that's a really long TED Talk, but
I love it. I
yeah.
feel like that could just go on and on. And I think there's so much to that that I wholly agree with. But yeah, just what a beautiful reflection of that simple act of being with
Would
your
you
child.
Oh, I'm interrupting you. I just remembered. I forgot to tell you. I also picked a random number generator and it feels like the moment to sprinkle it in.
Yes.
Okay, so for those of you who have not listened to the Improviding Live podcast, that is okay. So, Improviding as a framework has 6 tools. And so I use a random number generator before we start our conversation to pick a number. And I got number 2, which goes with the Improviding tool that is, if so, what else? And this is a step after yes anding. So it's this idea of if whatever we're talking about is valid, what else might be there? What other layers are there? So it feels like the time to sprinkle that in of if we're talking about this ability to have creativity and expression and joy and nuance and reflection, and validating all of the various lived experience that exist, if we could do that, what else becomes possible, Isabel?
Ooh, juicy question. I love it. And it feels so relevant to what we've been talking about, like the duality and the possibility with all of these things that we just talked about. But with embracing our creativity and embracing rest as not an extra step, but really integral to the process, so much really can be possible and open up for folks. And so, if I were to share specific examples for myself, for example, when I started to return back to my rituals and rest practices, or rather energy toolkits, after some time of feeling burned out and kind of overworking, did I actually call in opportunities? So we have this misconception that doing more work or putting in more hours will actually result in more results. It may seem like that on the surface, but you're feeling more tired, it's not sustainable, you don't get your ideas come to you as easily. So when I did practice and return to resting more and diving into what those practices look like for me that feel good, so, going outside, reading a fiction book, closing my laptop, uh, and walking around my neighborhood, that really helped me get more innovative ideas come more easily because I'm not attached to screens. I have my subconscious working for me in the background, and then an idea pops up, and so much more comes through because I'm letting my brain rest and not get overstimulated by external noises. I get a stronger connection to my intuition. I have a stronger channel to my own unique perspective and point of view, which feels more embodied and more clear and more potent instead of kind of getting influenced and mirroring back other templates or strategies that so many other peers are sharing. What is true for me and what I know is true for my community. And with that, feeling so rested and feeling so clear my perspective, I feel more confident in showing up more authentically in a way that doesn't feel forced. People can find me and see and receive my words and how I'm showing up. That, for example, 1 week of returning back to my rest practices because I got off of it. I'm a human. I go in my waves, my ebbs and flows. I literally had a job offer land into my LinkedIn DMs, and it was during a time where I was desiring um income during that time. And an old coworker just witnessed me showing up regularly and it said, "Hey, are you looking for for an opportunity?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am." And it felt really aligned when we got to chat. Um, And I'm so excited to work with her in a new way. And another opportunity that slid through was a chance to co-create a retreat with someone that I really admire. And and look up to in their work. And that aligned with a free trip to Chicago, which is where they live. And so all these things just build and build. There's this momentum that I notice happen so easily. Like I'm not even seeking them out. They just land into my peripheral view, into my view, into my life when I really integrate the rest and the care for myself so that I can show up so much more energized and so clear with my work, with space holding, with using my voice, with writing. And again, rest looks so different. It's not just meditation, it's not just still rest. It could also be active or energetic rest too. And what I share with a lot of my clients that I work with is it really roots back down to what does your body need right in this very moment? So, presence. What do you need in this moment to keep going to the next 5 minutes, to the next hour, to the next day? Is it food? Do you need food? Do you need to like shake off that energy and take a walk? Or is it just taking 5 deep breaths before your next hour-long Zoom meeting at work? So, those are some things that have been so exciting for me personally lately, and some things that I've offered with folks that I've worked with.
So juicy. So, this is going to share out the reverse order of how it happened, but I saw this visual of it's like we get so conditioned to trying to push the boulder up the hill when there's also this possibility to uh go ahead and just let ride down, right? And so it's all this effort of trying to force, and then, you know, when rest is possible and tapping into your inner sense of knowing and that restoration piece of being something that's so specific to the actual like moment you're living in. How could you find yourself at the top of maybe that, like snowy hill, and you didn't have to bring your own sled, right? It's just already there. Someone left it there. Oh, there's little mittens. Your hands won't get cold. Like it just, you can be taken care of. So I saw that visual and wanted to share that. And also though, I literally was like I was making these like yes sounds when you were sharing how through your rest practices, you have access to your own sense of perception and perspective, and that really felt related to something I love talking about, which is like the idea of you having an inner parent, right? So we have an inner child, but an inner parent is this, sort of accumulation of all of the voices, practices, and interactions that we've had from our own parents and caregivers, any, authority figures as we were growing up. And that then becomes often the inner voice through which we speak to ourselves, the lens through which we see the world. And so it just felt really accessible to think of sort of reacquainting and then perhaps rebranding. I'm not like retooling our inner parent when we have any amount of access to that slowing down and having a more nuanced relationship with what rest and receiving are. Um, yeah, because it's like the idea of you can like receive water in a cupped hand, but we're so often just like stop signing everything like no, I know what's happening, and really it's like hey ho, you don't have to work that fucking hard, like just yawn, just take a moment and yawn, because we're all exhausted being around ourselves and each other because of that. Yeah, of that sort of like table tennis. I think of it as we table tennis our shit back and forth to each other, and it's just like, what if there's a water break? Maybe some orange
Mm.
slices. What could that be like?
Yes, I love your visuals. They're so vivid, so specific, but so like it feels so relatable. I love
Well,
that.
thank you for
Yeah.
that feedback. And that's part of me honoring, allowing myself to exist, because I see my thoughts as words more often than having the words first. And a lot of my own journey to being, my full ass self is saying that that's valid because that's part of my experience. That gets to be okay. That gets to be a place where in trusting myself, I have found over the past few years that that is how the message needs to be shared for it to resonate with whoever it needs to resonate with. So thank you for that, because that is one way that I could that inner parent in myself could very easily police that out and has before of, oh no, it has to be the proper palatable way that you've been expected to, operate when really I'm like, I'm raggedy. I just need a nap. Like, I don't have that in me. And allowing then that, yeah, that sort of like picture book that lives upstairs to be sort of the spokesperson for the inner parent that's just like real
Mm,
sleepy and just needs a little cuddle.
yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And in thinking of that too, I am now curious on like, is there a certain skill or practice or something that you find you getting feedback or like recognized for when you're working with your clients of sort of how they're saying like, oh, this is so specific to Isabel, and do you have any like relationship then with like sort of receiving that or hearing that or sitting with that or like checking it or being like, oh, is that a projection or not? Because at the same time, I'm not sure of your human design profile lines or if you know or if you care, you don't have to, but thinking, I have a 5 in mine and that thought too of like, oh, it can be so nice to be reflected back, but then there's also that moment of like, is this actually how I feel about me? And yeah, and like sitting with that at the same time. Because it's great when it feels like a reflection of, oh, I can see that in myself. And then at the same time, it's like, oh, I think that's perhaps a you thing that I am like Velcroing right now. But yes, just all of those 5 questions. If you have any thoughts on any of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm still learning about human design. I am a generator and I'm a 1-3, which I'm still learning about what those numbers mean. So if you wanted to share, I'm all
Oh
ears.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the sort of Sparks notes, the Cliff Notes is a 1 is you're going to be the absolute expert of whatever is worthy and value of your attention and your interest, right? So it's the investigator. It's going to be like you probably have volumes of encyclopedias about what matters to you. And there's perhaps this energy of it doesn't feel comfortable or timely to act on things until you feel like that encyclopedia is within reach, right? So you're probably less likely, and again, all of this is just an experiment, but you're probably less likely to be like, oh, I'm going to go skydiving tomorrow because I saw an ad on Facebook and have never looked it up to see like what are the safety precautions. Do you know anyone who's gone who you could add, right? Like you probably would have a whole process to say, is this actually something I want to do? And at the same time, with being a 1-3, you have this energy. I have a 3. I'm a 3-5. The 3 is the experimenter. It's the person who's willing to be sort of on the bumper car of life. We essentially are like the Teflon skillets. We have a coating that other energies don't. It doesn't mean that it doesn't like suck when we have to go through trials and tribulations, but we just have a resilience that is more accessible to us than others. And so in that bumper caring, right, it's just I think of it as you're sort of on a merry-go-round, or no, maybe like this the sauce or the cups where it's like you're spinning but going around, and there's this huge buffet of life around you, and you're like, oh, I'll try some of that. Oh, I'll try some of this. Oh, I don't like that. Right. And so we're collecting and sampling. And at the same time, it's because we have the ability to find out what works and what doesn't work. And that's something so special to us. So then I imagine perhaps having a 1-3 that can feel like those encyclopedias that you're curating over time is because of the experiences and the adventures and the moments you're navigating in life. And then whichever ones have a certain sort of taste register or where you're like, oh, I want more of that, or I don't want more of this, but it's so valuable. I'm still going to take a deep dive because this needs to be known. That is that relationship perhaps that you feel between your energy and like how you're experiencing the world. That was not Cliff Notes. That was like 3 minutes,
No,
but
I love
yeah.
that. Yeah. And I hope people who are listening were taking notes because I definitely need to listen to this back, take my notes because that felt so spot on, of course. But thank you for diving into that.
Yeah. And so what's funny is I sort of asked the question before then that happened. So I'm actually going to like pull the questions to now the end. How did that feel to hear that back? Did that feel like you could see yourself in aspects of that? Because then that again was yeah, an opportunity of like sort of what my initial question was of, as you're in your work and having these conversations and opening up for the idea of exploring topics or connections or relationships that most of the Western world, at least from what I have experienced and know more of, is very averse to. So, like, yeah, how do you see any of yourself in that? Is there perhaps a way that that energy of having this thoughtfully curated sort of sampling of like the knowledge you want to share out shows up in your work?
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's so tied also with my Gemini sun. I love learning about everything. And so just with you diving into um the 1-3, it's like, yeah, I feel like that's what's the word? Amplified even more with my Gemini side. So, yeah, I really am excited with sharing things that I'm learning live. Like if I'm reading this really cool book or if there's this technique or framework that's been so exciting and successful for me. I'm not one to gatekeep. I can't gatekeep. I'm like, here's everything that I'm doing, and I feel like everyone needs to do it too, but of course, like in their own ways. And like just inviting folks into that knowledge or that, tip, whatever that is, that excites me. And I want to call in and embrace my community and new folks into what I'm learning because if it's working for me or if it's insightful and helpful for me, I there's probably at least one person out there who might feel some kind of microscopic shift with that exchange. I feel like it's not just a one-way teaching moment. I really love and really use the term knowledge exchange or energetic exchange, just finding what is new in the conversation or in interactions, even if it's just like an Instagram DM message of how folks interact with what I've shared. I, as a generator, just respond to things and feel really lit up by what feedback I get or what my environment is like. And so that drives me too of okay, let me just share this and see what sticks and what happens and be open to that and get excited by what people are responding to. And I think one of your earlier questions was what is like an Isabel thing that my community remembers from my work. One thing that has time and time again been so potent in my offerings and teachings to my clients and my community is again inner child work and play, a specific framework that has been developed by an art therapist, I believe Lucia Capaccioni, who brought in the term or the practice of using your non-dominant hand to access the non-linear or non-logical side of the brain, really accessing a part that is kind of like the subconscious part. I could be butchering that, but it's a part that, we don't really that that gets kind of repressed or we don't really can access because it's not a logical side. And so how we do that is using, let's say you use your right hand to write and draw or whatever it is, your non-dominant hand is the other hand. So for me, I use my right hand, so my non-dominant hand is the left. And so the practices that I guide folks through is either responding to a specific journal prompt or drawing something specific related to the practice or the intentions that we have set for that day. And based on that prompt of that day, what they draw or how they respond is so powerful in that moment. And it's such a quick and accessible technique and practice that people really get immediate shifts in accessing creative flow because you get this sense of inner child play by drawing or writing using your other side, releasing perfectionism because you're using your other hand. People really get challenged and feel this resistance because it's like, oh, it doesn't look good. I have to make it look a certain way. And they really face these little, you know, minute things that otherwise might not have come up. But when we face it, it's like, oh, we're releasing perfectionism here because we're doing something different, uncomfortable. And afterwards, people have time and time again shared that release of perfectionism, the ability to feel playful again in their creativity and not just in that moment, but in the time beyond our time together, either in our one-on-ones or in our group programs, and how it's shifted their creative processing. And when I brought this practice into a retreat I facilitated to incredible women of color, um, leaders in social impact space. One of them even shared like their brother is a neuroscientist, and was like, "How do you know this practice?" They must have texted each other during the break, and he had told her that he even uses this practice to journal to start the day. So this is like, you know, uh supported by neuroscientists. This is researched. So that is something that I, time and time again, love to share with folks because it's fun and so easy to do.
Yeah, thank you for, I love the depth that you went. It's such a beautiful example of your 1-3 energy because when someone hears this, they're gonna feel so equipped to now try it, right? You weren't just like, oh, pick up a pencil with your hand and leave. Like you didn't rush through, you allowed people to saturate themselves in it. So I just absolutely love that for myself and everyone else who listens. And I just have to share, I was getting this visual when you're speaking about that it gives you so many opportunities to navigate and ditch perfectionism. I was seeing this visual of like trying to get eyeliner symmetrical, and then you're like, oh wait, just a little more here and a little more here, and all of a sudden your eyeliner's up to your eyeball, like
Oh,
from your
yeah.
eyeballs up to your hairline, and you're just like, what even is eyeliner, right? And because I can imagine, I'm going to do that tonight. That not eyeliner. I don't know if I have any that's not expired. Journaling and playing doodling with my non-dominant hand, and also acknowledge that like there's certain activities that I use both hands for, so I'm ambidextrous, but it will give me a moment to notice, okay, well, which hand it feels more dominant for certain things, and then playing with that. So that will be a lot of fun. But yeah, just was seeing that visual of just like, well, a little here, a little there, and I have a Virgo Sun and Mercury, so I can very much see that. I'm like, oh, just little, just let me shush it a little bit. So absolutely love that you shared that. And also, I just had to share this beautiful visual I was getting as you were speaking about this like curation of community and wanting to share out what you're immersing yourself in as it's happening, and saying like you don't want to gatekeep things, and this languaging came through in this beautiful visual of you like weaving together this sort of like vine gate that you're actually a gate tender instead of a gatekeeper. And it was just so
Mm.
beautiful. It's like you're adorning these entryways for people to be able to come home to self,
Wow.
to be able to come back to community. Oh, my heart's getting all Care Berry
I
talking about it.
love that. Ugh.
Yeah, I'm just literally feeling the Care Bear. So pew pew spinning out the heartbeams. But yeah, it was just so beautiful. You were just like chilled out, like, sitting sort of like side saddle, just like weaving this little gate of
Mm.
just, like instead of it being an obstacle, it was like it was the entry point is like a beacon. It was like this is where you can arrive and feel sustained and nourished, and just like loved seeing and feeling that as you were sharing all of your thoughts on that. So, chef's kiss moment. Just
Oh my
so great.
gosh, that is absolutely beautiful. Thank you for sharing that vision. Uh, so your intuitive channeling of visions is incredible, just witnessing and receiving. So just wanted to acknowledge.
Oh, I feel like we're having a slumber party
Yeah.
also because we're in my office, as my brain calls it,
Yeah.
my core office. So just to set the mood for anyone who's
Yeah.
listening to the audio, not watching. Yeah, no, and I just am like, I will speak for myself and invite everyone else to reflect on how nourished they're feeling, because I'm just feeling so full. And it's like taking me back to the generated word of offender, right? In my experience being a larger bodied person since young, I mean like toddlerhood, right? Like just I was always a larger body. And I was essentially I was offensive to everyone in my family because of my size. And so the idea of fullness was so so dangerous, right? Like to take up space, to be full, to be larger, like was not there. So I'm just like stewing, marinating, really, like not stewing, marinating in this moment of feeling so full and that feeling so refreshing. And so thank you for that because yeah, I'm going to, I think that's what I'll journal on with my not with my left hand tonight is that idea of fullness and how it doesn't have to be that I'm full of everybody else's shit. I can actually be full of this like just yeah, nourishment and joy and possibility and play. And like a lot of really yummy food. And that's just like the whole point of being alive. Ugh, I love this for me.
Oh,
So
hell
thank you for
yeah.
curating that.
I love that.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts as we're having to unfortunately acknowledge that time like exists in some way? Do you have anything else you want to share? In case a prompt, air quote prompt helps, just how people can outreach and connect with you if you want them to, what ways you're supporting people. Is there any ways that we can support you? Do you want helped or hyped through anything right now? What's coming up?
Thank you for that invitation. Well, I just want to say thank you again for having me join on this conversation and chat with your community. This was such a lovely chat. And again, receiving and witnessing your vision magic is was so special. So thank you. And for those who felt nourished by this conversation and are ready to nurture your creative spirit without the burnout, with, finally launching those ideas with support and get compensated and get recognized and get seen, I would love to connect with you. And so you can find me at all the things Unconventional Bliss and just book a one-on-one call with me that is available to really chat through what your intentions are, what your goals are, and how that really can be accessible for your lifestyle, for your learning style, and get you seen and get you recognized and get your creative medicine shared with the community. Because if you're hiding, because I know a lot of projects are being hidden away in laptops and notebooks, or being on and off, not truly finished, how can your soul community and your collaborators and your clients find you if you're hiding? So I'm here for you, and I'm excited to meet with all of you.
Thank you so much. And I'm the self-proclaimed and I'm like embrace my inability to end things in conversations normally. So I love to then sort of intuit a sound to ask people to make, and I'll make, my version with you. So as you were sharing, that we often have our deepest desires and projects squirreled away. What do you think your inner Isabel's great ideas to bloom and blossom? Like what sort of like alarm clock or maybe like a gentle little ting reminder? What do you think that sounds like if it's trying to get your attention?
Mm.
And then I'll make mine. So I'll count to three and then we'll both just like make what we think our inner sort of like, hey, don't forget about me alarm sounds like.
Oh my gosh, is
Okay.
this like a sound or is this like
Yeah.
what am I describing? Oh,
Oh
okay.
yeah. So it's just gonna be, we're just gonna be weird and just make sounds of like. So mine's essentially going to be the vibe of like mine's usually like, hey bitch, pay attention, right? So I'll count to three
Got
and
it.
then you can just
Okay.
make whatever you think your inner sort of, can you please notice me instead of everything else
Mm,
outside? What does that sound like? All right, ready? We're gonna
okay.
count. If I can count. One, two, three.
Tweet, 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 tweet.
Like how your
I'm thinking
mind's like the
birds.
monster under the bed and you're just beautifully seen culture. Perfect.
I love
Oh,
that.
thank you for being weird and playing. And so for all of you listening, as always, have a razzle dazzle day. And if that's not accessible, you can put a font front and have a frazzle dazzle day.